Tom Jenkins had always preferred the quiet rhythm of his farm life, the low hum of the wind through the wheat, the clucking of hens near the barn, and the distant moo of his cattle grazing lazily under the morning sun. Saturdays were usually peaceful, the kind of days when he could sip his coffee on the porch and watch the clouds drift by. But that morning, something felt off. He heard faint music in the distance, followed by laughter and car doors slamming. Frowning, he set his mug down and stepped off the porch. As he rounded the barn, his jaw nearly dropped. A line of shiny SUVs and decorated sedans stretched down his dirt driveway, parked haphazardly along the fence. The field beyond was covered with white chairs, floral arches, and tables draped in elegant cloths. A giant wedding tent stood right in the middle of his pasture where his cattle usually grazed. People in suits and dresses hurried around, adjusting decorations and unloading catering trays as if they owned the place. For a moment, Tom thought he might be dreaming. Then he spotted a large banner fluttering in the wind that read, "Congratulations, Emily and Josh." His confusion turned to disbelief. Who on earth was Emily? And what were they doing on his land? He walked closer, boots crunching against the gravel, until a man in a tuxedo stopped him, mistaking him for a worker. "Hey, buddy, can you move those hay bales? The photographer wants a cleaner shot." That was the last straw. "I own this land," Tom snapped, his voice cutting through the chatter. "What's going on here?" The man blinked, flustered, before pointing toward the crowd. "You'll have to ask Karen. She said it was fine." Tom's stomach tightened. Karen Mitchell, the HOA president and self-appointed ruler of their community, had always been a thorn in his side. She'd complained about his tractor noise, his barn lights, even the smell of his cows. But this? This was new territory. He stormed toward the tent, passing waiters setting up champagne glasses, and saw Karen at the center of it all, clipboard in hand, ordering people around like a queen. As Tom watched her smile for photos on his property, a slow burn of anger rose in his chest. Something told him this was going to be a day she wouldn't forget. Karen turned just as Tom approached, her wide-brimmed hat tilted perfectly and her sunglasses glinting in the afternoon sun. She flashed a rehearsed smile, the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Tom. So glad you could make it," she said, waving her clipboard as if this was all some pleasant misunderstanding. "Isn't it beautiful? Your land looks simply stunning today. You should be proud, it's the perfect backdrop for Emily's big day." Tom's brow furrowed. "Proud? Karen, this is my farm. You can't just show up with a wedding party and set up shop like it's a public park." His voice carried across the field, turning a few curious heads. Karen sighed dramatically, lowering her glasses. "Oh, Tom, don't be so uptight. We discussed this at the HOA meeting last week. Everyone agreed your property would be ideal for the wedding. It's for the community, you know. And since you didn't object." "I wasn't even at that meeting," Tom interrupted sharply. "You can't vote to use someone's private property just because you think it's pretty." Unbothered, Karen gave a dismissive laugh. "Honestly, Tom, it's just one day. You barely use this pasture anyway. I figured you wouldn't mind lending it for a few hours. Think of it as good neighborly spirit." She gestured around proudly as the florist arranged bouquets near the altar. "Besides, Emily's wedding planner has everything under control. You won't even notice we're here." Tom took a deep breath, trying to contain his anger. "Oh, I've noticed, all right. You're trespassing, Karen. All of you." Her smile faltered for a second, then returned, tighter than before. "You wouldn't really ruin a young couple's special day, would you? That would look terrible for you and the HOA." Tom crossed his arms, eyes narrowing. "You should have asked." That's all it would have taken. But Karen was already turning away, pretending not to hear him, barking orders to the caterers about where to place the champagne table. Her arrogance was infuriating. She truly believed she was untouchable, that her word carried more weight than the law itself. Tom stared at her for a long moment, his anger simmering just below the surface. If Karen wanted to use his land without permission, she was about to find out exactly what that decision would cost her. Tom walked back toward the barn, every step deliberate, the crunch of gravel echoing his growing determination. He'd spent years dealing with Karen's meddling, complaints about his animals, noise, even the color of his tractor, but today was different. This wasn't an annoying email or a petty fine. This was personal. She'd invaded his property, treated it like her own, and humiliated him in front of strangers. As laughter and music drifted across the field, Tom's jaw tightened. If Karen wanted a show, he was about to give her one she'd never forget. Inside the barn, the familiar smell of hay and machinery steadied him. He glanced around, his eyes landing on the large manure spreader he'd cleaned just 2 days ago. The cows had been particularly productive lately, and the fresh manure pile behind the pens was more than enough to make a point. He rubbed his chin, a small grin forming as an idea took shape. "You wanted a rustic farm wedding," he muttered under his breath. "Well, you're about to get one." He climbed onto his old green tractor, fired up the engine, and backed it toward the manure heap. The machine rumbled to life, the sound barely audible over the wedding music that blared from the speakers in the distance. With careful precision, Tom loaded the spreader, the thick, pungent muck filling the container. The stench alone made his eyes water, but it only strengthened his resolve. As he rolled the tractor out of the barn, a few guests glanced his way, assuming he was just another farmer doing his chores. They smiled politely before turning back to their champagne glasses. Tom gave them a friendly nod, hiding his smirk. He circled the edge of the pasture slowly, keeping his distance from the main crowd until the ceremony began. When he saw the bride take her place under the arch and Karen stand proudly near the aisle, clipboard in hand, Tom flipped the lever. A thick mist of cow manure sprayed high into the air, carried perfectly by the light afternoon breeze, straight toward the guests. The reaction was instant. Screams, gasps, and chaos erupted as people ran in every direction. Tom stayed calm behind the wheel, watching his fields and Karen's precious wedding transform into a brown, muddy disaster. Justice, he thought, smelled exactly like this. The chaos that followed was nothing short of cinematic. Guests were shrieking, stumbling over chairs, and clutching at their clothes as the foul stench rolled through the field. The bride's white gown, once glistening in the sunlight, was now splattered with streaks of brown. The groom tried to shield her with his jacket, but it was useless. Everything within 50 feet was covered. The carefully arranged flowers wilted under the spray, the buffet table toppled, and the wedding band stopped mid-song, abandoning their instruments to flee toward the parking lot. In the middle of it all stood Karen, frozen in shock, her perfect curls stiff with horror. She turned toward Tom, who sat calmly atop his tractor, engine idling, a faint smile tugging at his lips. You lunatic," she screamed, waving her clipboard like a weapon. "You've ruined everything. I'll have you arrested for this." Tom climbed down from the tractor, wiping his hands on his jeans as he walked toward her. "Arrested? For what?" "You're the one trespassing on my land, Karen. You never asked for permission, never signed anything, and you decided to hold a full-blown wedding here without so much as a phone call." Several guests stopped mid-run to listen. Karen's face turned red as she stammered, We voted on it." The HOA agreed. "The HOA," Tom interrupted with a dry chuckle, "doesn't own this farm." "I do. And now you all know what happens when someone disrespects it." Before Karen could respond, the wail of sirens cut through the air. Someone had called the police. Within minutes, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived, stepping out of their patrol car and surveying the scene with wide eyes. It didn't take long for the situation to become clear. Tom handed over his deed, pointing out the property lines and explaining what had happened. The deputies turned to Karen, who was still splattered with mud and manure, and simply said,